Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of our witnesses today.
Wait, listen.
Professor Sarin, you're a professor at Yale Law School?
I am.
Okay. And I see you've been pretty active on Twitter. I'm looking at one of your tweets from a few months ago, October 30th, 2023. I'd like to read it to you. The House Republican stance is, I kid you not, support for Israel as long as we make it easier for people to cheat on their taxes. End quote. Did you tweet that?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. How many Republican congressmen or women did you talk to before you made that statement?
I was reacting to the fact that, and we've talked about it actually.
Yes,
so
ma'am,
far
but
in this.
first, if you could, how many Republican congresswomen or congressmen did you talk to?
I didn't talk to them. I actually was just reacting to the legislation that was proposed.
You didn't
and
talk to any of them
No, sir.
before you said that every single one of them supports Israel only if it is made easier for people to cheat on their taxes?
I actually don't think that every single one of them believes
But
that.
that's what
I-
you
But I
said.
do think that the legislation passed by the House reflects a statement of purpose that in order to support Israel, it's
But I'm
important
looking at
to
what you said.
allow
What your
taxpayers to
students
be able
saw.
to cheat on their taxes.
You said that every single House Republican, none of whom you talked to, would only support Israel if it was made easier for Americans to cheat on their taxes. Now, you said that, and you didn't talk to any of them.
Senator Kennedy,
Didn't.
I am struck by, and perhaps this is something on which we agree, that it is incredibly important to support Israel. It is also incredibly important to make sure that
Well,
taxpayers at the
I'm not,
top of the distribution
we agree on
pay their
Israel,
fair
but I
share.
just can't believe you would say this about members of Congress. It's pretty pejorative, vicious. Let me finish. Without talking to them. I mean, would it be possible for somebody to support a reduction to the IRS budget because they simply believe the federal government ought to have a balanced budget? Would that be a fair position?
That
Would that be a principled position?
Except that that actually doesn't work with respect to defunding
Would
the
it be a
IRS.
principled position?
It wouldn't be an accurate position because
Okay.
defunding
But you don't
the
know because you
IRS
didn't talk to anybody, did you?
Well,
You just said it.
Defunding the IRS, the CBO agrees, everyone who's testifying today agrees that that is going to add to deficits, not reduce
Could
them.
it be that a House Republican wanted to reduce the IRS's budget because they think that the IRS is a model of inefficiency and shouldn't be rewarded with more money?
Well,
Could that have been a possibility, a motivation for the way they
Senator
voted?
Kennedy, I so appreciate that question because the reality,
Could that have been
that the
a
reason-
motivation for the way they voted?
and it relates very closely to what Senator
Could
King
that have
said,
been a motivation for the way they
reason
voted?
that you've seen an inefficient
Could that have
IRS.
been a motivation
If you allow
for
the
the way
witness
they
to
voted?
answer, you might get your answer, Senator
It
Kennedy.
frankly couldn't have been.
It
because
could or couldn't?
It could not have been.
How do you know you didn't talk to him?
Because the reason why you've seen
You
an
just
IRS
made this
that
statement that
hasn't been
every Republican in the House supports Israel only if it has been made easier for people to cheat on their taxes. Could it be that maybe a House member thought that, well, the more money we spend, the more deficits we have, and the more deficits we have, the more pressure is put on interest rates, and the higher interest rates go, the more it hurts the poor. Could that have been
Senator
the position
Kennedy-
of one of the House Republicans?
Senator Kennedy,
Could it have been theoretically?
couldn't have been because
Could it-
everyone
it couldn't have
agrees.
been?
It frankly couldn't
How do
have
you know
been.
you didn't talk to him?
Well, I know that everyone agrees, including witnesses across the aisle, including CBO, including every single tax expert that has contemplated this question, that defunding the IRS makes deficits worse, not better. And so this is a deficit
I just find it,
measure.
Professor, appalling. Appalling that you would make a statement like this, a vicious statement like this, without talking to a single person about whom you made this statement. And I'm going to remind you, you know, you can only be young once, but you can always be immature. And you ought to think about that.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Let me just say that I think that the treatment of witnesses is beginning to degrade a bit here. And I'm going to strike some commentary if it continues down this road. I think personal insults to witnesses are not appropriate, and I will not be tolerant of that in this committee.
Well, could I respond, Mr. Chairman? You're going to
Fire away. I think you just called a
You're
Yale
going to
Law
do
School
what you got to
professor
do,
immature.
but I'm going to continue to use my time. You bring witnesses as you're entitled to, and some of them are very good. Some of them have the credibility of Michael Avenatti, and I'm going to use my time when I think it's appropriate to
And I'm
test.
going to use my authority as chairman
to test
as I think
credibility,
it is appropriate
witnesses'
as well,
credibility.
in
So
order
you
to
do
keep
what you
order
got to do, and I'm going to
and
do what I got to do.
good behavior in
But
a
if that
Senate
is meant
committee.
to bully me, you're talking
No
to the
attempt to
wrong
bully
guy.
you. No attempt to bully you, none at all. It's to keep the witness and the committee free of bullying.
I'm entitled to test their credibility, and I think one of our witnesses just got tested.
I hope I passed, Senator. Thank you.
You didn't.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start at the outset. I'm an accountant. I value audits. My wife was an IRS auditor, so we need that. There's no doubt about it. Okay, you can argue legitimately, to what extent, how many auditors, how much we should spend on it. That's legitimate conversation. I do have to admit, though, every time I hear the chairman or the chairman of the Finance Committee say the word wealthy tax cheat, I think of the name Hunter Biden and all of the Biden family members who have been participating in his influence peddling grifts. I think it's interesting, as much as this hearing is emphasizing on audits, that when Senator Grassley and I were conducting our very legitimate investigation, using our constitutional responsibility of oversight, when we were investigating tax cheating, influence peddling, money coming in, tens of millions of dollars from foreign entities to impact potentially U.S. policy. Democrat senators, our ranking members, not only frustrated, I would say obstructed our investigation by falsely claiming we were soliciting and disseminating Russian disinformation. Now, that just happened to parrot what we've now found out the FBI set up their Foreign Influence Task Force, what they were doing in their catch and kill operation, find derogatory information that was being developed by 40 confidential human sources, and then go kill it. Go say, no, don't look into that. Don't go down that investigatory hole, because that's Russian disinformation. So the question I have based on that, Professor Sarin, it's obvious we have a dual system of justice applied to tax compliance. When somebody is connected politically as Hunter Biden, when his investigatory team allows the statute of limitations to expire on the most serious tax evasion charges, what does that dual system of justice, what does that do in terms of taxpayer compliance?
So, Senator Johnson, I actually want to take a step even higher, but with your sort of
Quickly, please.
theme of democracy and heart. In this country today, we have a two-tiered tax system, as you acknowledge. Your constituents who are wage earners are already paying everything that they owe, and a very small proportion of very wealthy individuals and large corporations have the opportunity to...
Okay, and that was your testimony. Again, I want you to speak to the fact that the president's son is largely skating because they allowed the statute of limitations to run. What does that do to compliance in terms of Americans' attitude toward that, Professor Hendren?
Judge, welcome.
Thank you.
You are probably the least productive member of your district court. Isn't that right?
Well, I have not considered myself in those terms, Senator.
Well, let me explain what I mean. You have 125 motions pending that you've declined to decide.
Well,
Just
Yeah.
let me finish. That's more than any other district judge in the entire Seventh Circuit. In fact, you rank 7th highest nationally, do you not?
I am not familiar with those statistics, Senator Kennedy.
You haven't looked?
I did look in preparation for this hearing, but I didn't compare myself to others.
You haven't seen that you ranked the 7th the worst in the country in terms of making decisions?
You are the first to tell me this. And I think for me, I stress the quality of my decision-making. And as I explained, I came on, I was the first district judge to come on during this administration.
Yeah, but so were all the others. I mean, there have been 68 district judges confirmed in the 117th Congress. In terms of motions pending for more than 6 months, you rank number 3. You all came on at the same time. You all had the same problems with COVID. You're the 3rd worst. You really think of all the other district judges in the 7th Circuit, you're the one that ought to be promoted based on this record?
Senator, this is something that I've discussed with my fellow judges. Many of us new judges from...
Not you said you'd never looked at these statistics.
I haven't, these particular statistics I am not familiar with. But in terms of new judges, both from the current administration and the former administration, we are quite a collegial bunch, and oftentimes talk about the pressures of a new judge and the way reassignments work in our district, which is that you get, for example, 300 cases.
Yes, ma'am, I understand. I'm familiar with
Yeah.
the procedure in federal court. Here's what I'm trying to understand. Why is your record so bad?
Well, I don't view it that way, Senator. When I look at the quality of my decision-making, the feedback that I get from parties,
Well, of course, parties are not going to criticize you. They want you to rule in their favor.
I understand, Senator Kennedy.
I mean, that's just the way it works. Help me understand why you have such an abysmal record in moving cases. I mean, it costs a lot of money to litigate, and people are paying lawyers, and time is money. And of all the district court judges in the 7th Circuit, you're the worst in terms of moving cases. Why do you think you deserve to be promoted over all of those others?
So, Senator, again, I'm not familiar with the statistics, but I stand by my record and that I give parties what they need. I think, I am regularly in my courtroom. I am regularly issuing decisions. I just came on at a very difficult time where there was a backlog in the courts.
So did everybody else. Let me ask you, when you were a partner in your law firm, you volunteered to write a brief on behalf of the Brady Center. You wrote the brief, and this is what you said. You volunteered for this. You weren't being paid. Is that right?
This was a pro bono case that one of my partners brought in, yes.
You said, quote, assault weapons may be banned because they're extraordinarily dangerous and are not appropriate for legitimate self-defense purposes, close quote. Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. Just to clarify there, I was local counsel. Our Supreme...
Yeah, but you wrote the brief. Tell me what you meant by assault weapons.
Senator Kennedy, actually, I did not write the brief. The brief was written by,
You signed the brief, though, didn't you?
correct, I signed the
When you
brief.
sign a brief, you're testifying to the court that everything in it is true, right?
Yes,
Okay.
and
So they're your words in terms of the court, right?
well, you're correct, Senator Kennedy. I would never
Tell me
sign.
what you meant by assault weapons.
So I am not a gun expert, and at the time, that brief, I think, was about 10
You
years.
were giving the court advice about, say, ban assault weapons. What is, you told the court you were an expert. Just tell me what you wanted to ban.
Senator, sitting here today, as I said, I did not write that brief. I was local counsel.
Sign the brief.
I understand. At the time
Tell
that
me what you wanted to ban. That's all I want to know, Judge.
I don't remember the exact definition of assault weapons in the ordinance that was at issue.
So you submitted a brief to an appellate brief, you signed it, and you don't know what, and you said abolish assault weapons, and you don't know what you wanted them to abolish?
Senator, at the time that I signed the brief, I read the brief because our Supreme Court required someone, an Illinois bar member, to sign the brief. I was not responsible for researching the content.
You were responsible for the brief. You signed it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sitting here today, I do not remember the characteristics of that were cited in the ordinance for the assault weapons ban. It's not an area of practice that I have specialized in. I'm sure 10 years ago I could have answered your question,
And
but
Judge,
sitting here today,
you think you deserve to be promoted?
Judge, welcome.
thank you.
Appreciate you being here. I want to talk to you about your relationship with demand justice. And during your last confirmation process before this committee, you said in response to a question for the record that you've spoken with Demand Justice's co-founder, Chris King, and I'm quoting you, a couple of times about the judicial nominations process, end quote. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. I've looked at the positions that Demand Justice has taken, and one of their priorities has been to expand the Supreme Court. So did you speak with Mr. King about expanding the Supreme Court?
No, Senator Blackburn. My conversations with Mr. King were limited to getting advice and guidance on how the nomination process worked. It was quite opaque to me at that point, and so he provided
All right. Do you
guidance.
support increasing the number of justices on the Supreme Court?
That is a matter that I am precluded from opining on under the canons. But I think if you look at my record, I've never taken that position.
I don't think you're precluded on giving an opinion as to whether or not you think that the Supreme Court should be expanded. And Demand Justice has suggested that adding 4 justices would bring, and I quote them, restore balance and integrity. So do you think that there's a particular number of justices that should be added to the Supreme Court?
Senator Blackburn, I have never taken any position on this. I don't think it's appropriate for me to opine on it.
Okay, Demand Justice claims that the Supreme Court is, and I'm quoting them, unethical, unaccountable, and out of control. Do you share that assessment?
Senator, I don't have a relationship with Demand Justice. I've only spoken to Mr. King on a couple occasions several years ago. I'm not familiar with their positions, but I don't associate myself with those.
Obviously, you respected him, or you wouldn't have called him and gotten advice from him. So that is what concerns me, that you would go to a far left-leaning group to get advice on how to come before the Senate Judiciary Committee. I want to, Senator Kennedy talked with you about your ranking, and you are, as he told you, number 1 at having the biggest backlog in the 7th Circuit, and you're number 7 nationwide with outstanding motions. And the thing, as I looked at this, Judge, what is very curious to me is how you're so out of step with the other district judges as far as managing your time and moving cases forward and actually making decisions. I looked at the alarm detection systems case, and you've had a fully briefed motion since September of '22. And then the Palladino Wells Fargo case, you've had since November of '22. So I understand how time-consuming the work is. I understand, and let me tell you, we do a lot of reading. We do a lot of prep work for our hearings. But I find it interesting that when you have a fully briefed case in front of you, you cannot come to a decision. So what hinders you from being able to arrive at decisions when you have everything you need to make the decision?
Thank you, Senator. I wouldn't say that I'm hindered in my decision-making. In fact, if you look at my record, I am a fan of ruling on the record. And so I've done decided many motions on the record at hearings over the course of several hours. So I'm not hindered.
District Judge, let's talk about that, because I went in and looked at your record, and I noted the fact that you've only presided over one civil trial to verdict in your nearly 2 years on the bench. One trial, just one. And that, combined with the fact that you had tried only 3 cases when you were in private practice, leads me to question your fitness for the court. So how can you expect us to confirm you to the circuit court when in 2 years you've presided over one civil trial and your backlog is larger than nearly everyone else? What would qualify you?
Senator, I would look at the quality of my decision-making.
Other judges find a way to do expediency and quality of work. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I believe Senator Lee is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Judge Maldonado, for being here. When we look at the work of a federal district judge, it's a busy docket. One has a lot of motions to follow and to stay on top of. Some of the motions that end up taking a lot of time are on the civil docket side of things, motions for summary judgment. In your view, what's worse, when you've got a close case, to grant a non-meritorious dispositive motion or a Rule 56 summary judgment motion, or to fail to grant a motion for summary judgment where it is warranted? In a close case, which one is worse, or is either worse?
Thank you, Senator Lee. So I am very careful with motions for summary judgment because I respect the role of the jury. And I think it is rather arrogant for me to decide there's no disputed issue of material fact. And so I inherited, tens and tens of motions for summary judgment, and I take those very seriously because I don't want to take someone's day in court away from them and usurp the role of the jury. Sure. So those are the most time-consuming motions that I have before me. And just to clarify, when I received my reassignment, many motions that I received were from 2020, 2021, and so I had to triage and have a pipeline and decide the oldest first, and that was sort of my plan of attack, to decide those older motions first.
Okay, that's helpful to know. So it sounds like you may have gotten assigned some dogs when you arrived. It happens sometimes with the newly arrived judge. It's sort of a hazing ritual among some judges. Well, the reason I ask about the dispositive motion issue is that there's a natural tendency among judges, including federal district judges, to want to not face the more difficult decision whenever they can avoid it. It is more difficult to grant a motion for summary judgment than it is to deny one. And you're subject to appeal much more quickly, more likely to get reversed, and if you deny it, the parties might well settle and call that trial by attrition. It's a list of paradoxes that exist in the court, in the judicial system. On the one hand, justice delayed is justice denied. On the other hand, as evidenced by the turtles on display in the courtyards at the Supreme Court across the street. Sometimes the deliberative process needs to be deliberate, and it needs to be slow-paced. And so those tensions have to be managed. But the risk we run into is the judge looking for ways, perhaps, to minimize the judge's exposure to being overturned on appeal and the workload. Granting the motion for summary judgment requires you to write an opinion or order, which takes time and can be immediately appealed. Now, of these cases that you've got, I think it's 125 pending motions that you've got, ranking you as number 1 in the Seventh Circuit, number 7 in the nation. There are some that are troubling, some that, including one that was filed by a prisoner. This is not complex multi-district litigation involving huge mega corporations. There's one, for example, that's been fully briefed since November 2021, for 3.5 years nearly. We call this a fully ripe motion for summary judgment. The prisoner in this case filed the case complaining that he's, while in prison, suffering extreme tooth pain. It's apparently going unaddressed while he's in prison. They've done everything they can to get it teed up. It's fully briefed, it's before you, and just last month the plaintiff submitted another status report request of the court, and your response was, quote, "The court has taken defendant's motions under advisement and will endeavor to rule on both in the near future." What does that mean here, endeavor to rule? And what more would you need to rule on a case of that relative simplicity in less than 3.5 years?
Thank you, Senator. So do you happen to know the name of that case?
We can get that for you.
Okay. So there is a triage process that I follow in my chambers. We're generally working on the oldest motions, and I think reading what you just wrote, listening to what you just read to me, I think this means it's in the immediate pipeline, meaning that it's in the top, 10 things that are immediately going to be issued. Now, I am a very involved judge. I edit every single thing that goes out of my chambers, and so oftentimes and I go back and forth with my law clerks on drafts. It's not sometimes the most rapid process,
But does this case ring a bell? Do you recognize?
If I knew the name, it's probably, with all my law clerks, we have our list of things that we're working on, our pipeline, which has to be based somewhat on chronology. So you mentioned November 2021. I wasn't even on the bench yet. And so that came to me almost a year old.
Right.
And that wasn't even one of the oldest.
It was fully ripe before you became a judge. And
a year before I became a judge.
And I understand that sometimes new judges, part of this hazing ritual that I described, get assigned dogs, get assigned a long list of cases with pending dispositive motions. I understand that happens. But we will get that information to you. I raise it simply because it is very important that we not drag those out. At some point, it becomes trial by attrition, and the parties lose a lot when justice is delayed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.